Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways, Torah Life Ministries. Hello everybody, it's Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries. We have this week's Torah Parashah. We're in the 28th reading of this week's cycle, and we're right in the middle of two readings last week and this week, where we're talking about something called Tazari, which I probably am pronouncing wrong, but it's a skin disease that developed certain people during the times that these scriptures were written, and there's specific instructions on how somebody could be made clean or be healed of this disease, and how the priest or the so-called doctors, they were the ones to examine and officially say somebody is clean or not clean and what's to be done about it. They held the pen and had the doctor's note, if you want to say that. So we're looking at this week's Torah Parashah, and it's Leviticus 14:1 to 15:33. And so we're going to look at this here, and it says here that it's concerning Tazari, and it says a person is to be brought to the priest, the Kohen, and they're going to examine him, and they're going to say if he's clean or not clean. But even if they say he's okay, his disease is okay, now they still have to go through a ritual, or they still have to do some things. It's not, okay, I'm clean, I can be here. No, they still have to do some things. And this whole verse, this whole chapter is about what they have to do. And sacrifices were to be made. And you know, they told them to make sacrifices on the seventh day, and then sometimes you had to wait even longer. And even in one part, it even says they're to shave their whole body. So this contagious skin disease did not afflict the community and destroy the community. Now, you know, the sages will say that it's Lashon Hara, which is the speaking evil of the tongue. But the more I study and the more I look at this, I don't see that anywhere here where that would even lead to that. It sounds good, but, you know, in the scripture it says, do not add or take away from my word. And I think the Orthodox community does a great job in figuring out what the word says. But to do that, and very often they add a lot to it. And I think to say that Lashon Hara has to do with this reading or this illness is something I don't see the more I look into this. And that's something that the Orthodox community, or at least the Jewish people that have read the Torah for many, many years, often say. The sages will say that. But I don't see that. What I see is some interesting things here. It was a skin disease. Now, was it leprosy? Now, you know, last week I said it wasn't leprosy, and it's often mistaken for leprosy. But I come to realize in my study there are many different forms of leprosy. And regardless of what it was, if it was leprosy or something else, we know one thing, that this is not around today. At least in a form like it's supposed to be. Maybe psoriasis. Maybe that's what it is today. Who knows? I mean, it sounds like something like psoriasis. But the bottom line is, it was an illness that affected a person or afflicted a person, and they were told to separate themselves from the community until they were better. And then when they came back in the community, the priest had to examine them, approve them to come back into the community. And then once they did, they had to go through this ritual of cleansing, and then also making or bringing to the priest an animal to be sacrificed. So that's what these verses were about. And here's some things I found interesting this week, though. It says here in Leviticus 14:33 and 34, Yahweh said to Moses and Aaron, when you have entered the land of Canaan, where I'm giving you as a possession, that was the promised land, and I put an infliction of Tazari in a house in the land you possess. And then it goes on to say in verse 35, then the owner of the house is to come and tell the Kohen. Now this is very interesting, because it says, prior to it, it says, when you have entered the land of Canaan, the promised land, which I am giving you as a possession. So he told Aaron and Moses, I'm giving you this land, it's been promised to you. So they knew where they were going. But he says, when you go there, I put infection of Tazari in a house in a land you possess.
So we see here something very interesting that kind of gives us a clue to what this illness is or what this affliction is. It's something that Yahweh is putting on the people. And that might be because the people have done something and he's showing them their ways or the errorous ways, or it could be for another reason. But it says here, the infection that I put on the people. And then he goes on to tell them the instructions of how the priests are to examine it and what goes along with that. You know, what's very interesting about this is when they were in Egypt, this illness or this disease, affliction, there was no such thing, or at least it wasn't spoken of in Egypt. And then they came out and then they were in the desert, and then they're going into the promised land. But in Exodus 15:26 it says, if you keep all my statutes and commands, I will put none of disease upon you that I put upon the Egyptians. Well, there's nowhere to say that the Egyptians suffered from this skin disorder or disease or whatever you want to call it. However, it also says in the scriptures, I believe it's Deuteronomy, it says, here is what you're to do when you go into the promised land. You're supposed to destroy the unclean things, the unclean people. Completely destroy these, every single one. And Yahweh says, if you do, you will be blessed abundantly. But if you do not, what was supposed to happen to them will happen to you. But then he goes on to say, I will put on you diseases you never even heard of yet. Amazing. So up to this point, we never heard of this Tazari, this illness, this disease of the skin affliction. But Yahweh said, if you go there and do what you're supposed to do, you know, you'll be blessed abundantly. But if you don't, I will give you diseases you don't even know of yet. And I found that very interesting because they did go there and they didn't do what they were supposed to do. But then he went on and he said here in 36, it says, the Kohen is to order the house emptied before he goes to inspect the infection, so that everything in the house won't be made unclean. Afterwards, the Kohen is to enter and inspect the house. He will examine the infection. And then it goes on to say if he sees it's as bad or as good or what degree it's in, and he's going to go tell the people what they have to do to make themselves clean again. But we see here, we're going to go to 14:42 of Leviticus. It says, finally, other stones may be set in place of the first stones in order to plaster the use and replaster the house. You see, when a Kohen went in to inspect everything, it wasn't just the people, it was the house. Because this infection didn't only infect the skin of people, it actually infected their house, almost like mold. So the Kohen went and inspected the house, inspected the people. But it goes on to say in Leviticus 14:43, if the infection returns and breaks out in the house after the stones have been removed and the house scraped and plastered, then the Kohen is to say it is a contagious Tazari in the house and it is unclean. And he must break down the house and take its stones, timber, plaster out to the city to the unclean place. Now, two things I find. We can transpose this word house with heart or community. And it's pretty interesting what it says. Replaster the heart. If the infection returns and breaks out again in the heart after the stones have been removed, that the heart is scrapped and plastered. And then the Kohen or the priest are to say it's unclean. You see, it's talking about this affliction that's going to start with the skin, but it can actually get into the walls of the house. And what I'm saying is, Yahweh gave us this temple, and this is our house where we dwell. And the affliction is on our skin, but if it's so contagious, it can get on our heart. And if it becomes in our heart, then it's going to really inflict us. And the priest will examine a person, and they will see the degree of this illness, this disease. And they go on to say, if the walls of the house or if the heart, is considered unclean, then it's to be taken apart and thrown out of the camp into the area of the unclean. Well, folks, What's supposed to happen with unclean people? Yahweh said it best. Separate and divide, and those unclean people, while they're unclean, are not to be with the clean. So if we want to be clean, we have to look at the heart. We have to look at the outer body. It says the actions reflect the heart, like a face is reflected in water. So maybe it's not starting on the outside with the skin and contaminating the walls of the house. Maybe it's starting on the walls of the house, or maybe it's starting on the heart, and it's contaminating the skin. And the priests were investigating the heart to determine where a person really was. Possibly. Now, I don't want to be like the Pharisees and the sages and the Orthodox community and add some things to these things that, they say Lashon Hara, it's Lashon Hara. Maybe, maybe not, but I don't see it. But what I'm telling you now is what I do see. And I tell you, in the last couple of weeks, I've heard a ton of different teachings on this topic. And some interesting concepts, and some that were just off the wall. But I hope this one makes a little bit of sense. And we also said that the word house can mean community, because he is told if he's unclean, he must be taken out of the house and put in a place for the unclean. If he's unclean, he must be taken out of the community or away from the community and be in a place where the people were unclean. It says in the scriptures in Mark 7:15, there is nothing outside a person which, by going into him, can make him unclean. Rather, it is the things that come out of a person which makes a person unclean, because they're coming out of the heart. And Tazari is something that afflicted the people in the desert, and it was still going to afflict the people when they got to the promised land, according to this week's reading. And I believe it's an unclean heart that will lead to more diseases. So it's not what's coming in, it's what's going out. Going out from the heart, and like the Orthodox community say, going out from the tongue. Well, the tongue and the mouth is just going to say what's on the heart, and it's going to reveal its ugly head, so to say, or its Tazari. And so that's some interesting things from this week's reading, everybody. What's your comments or opinion about this? And again, I've heard a lot about these last couple of weeks. And it's a challenging one, because we don't know for sure what this is. But whatever it is, we do know that we can be cleansed and we can be clean again. And so that's exciting news. That's encouraging. So wherever you're at, whatever you're going through out there, understand there's always a future and a hope. That's what Yahweh says. So until then, everybody, this is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries saying have a great Sabbath this coming Shabbat. And until then, shalom, shalom.
Come out of the world, oh my people, seek the truth, avoid the evil, learn Yahweh's ways.